let us create a user object and write some web services around it. So I put the user object in a folder called entity. In this, I'll create a class called user info. Here the properties can be private, long, ID, private, string, name, private, long, age. And we create the source code here. Right click, generate, getters and setters. I select all and click generate. It created the getter setters for all these properties. I see it is not generated for age. Let us do that for age also. Okay, good. Also, I wanted to create a toString also, so that I can easily print it and see it. Generate toString with all the properties in it. Okay. Also, I want to create a constructor using which we can create this object quickly. Right. This is the constructor, and this is a toString function which is usually copied at the end. Looks good. Let's go to a controller. Let's create a controller for this. Let us create a class called user info controller, and we have to create a add an annotation called REST controller to it. Import REST controller @request mapping, and user info. We create a method called public user info get. This should get the list of all the users from the system. So we want to get the list of all users from the system by default. For that, we have to add a mapping call @request mapping, and method equal to request method dot get. Let's create a list of user info objects and return from here. This is a simple get method. We are just creating, we are just using this method to get the list of objects. Usually post function is used for creating the objects or adding the objects to the system. So let me create similar method called post, and here if you see, I didn't give the a value here like I have done it for the other controller. I didn't give the value here. That means it will be considered blank. Like after user info, if I give get, if I ask for get method, it'll just give me it will just trigger this method. If I make a post call over that URI, it will call this method. And for post, we have to get an object here, right? If user has to send an object from the front end, so it is sent via request body, and the data type is user info object, info class, and the variable name is, I'll just name with almost the same name, user info. So that is the input for this function. I'm just checking if it is null or not null. All right, now I have to save this information to a database. For now, I'll write a utility function which stores this information in memory. So let me create a folder called util folder. This is a generic util. I can put any utilities into this. Demo applications util class. Here I will write a function for saving the information, saving the user info objects, public user info. So let me add a user info property at the class level. I'm adding a user info object to this list, and I'll just do a null check before it. If null not equal to user info, I'm adding it to a list. This is for creating a user info object. I'll write one for get. Above one is for create user info. This is for getting user info. Let's say if simply get user info is called, we'll just return the list of user info objects. Change the method return type to list of user info. If ID for a user ID is given, then we will get only that user info. Here we will iterate over the list of all the user info objects, and then return that object which matches with this ID. We'll just stream it. We'll create a stream of user info objects and filter based on a predicate called P, and P dot ID, get ID dot equals ID, which we got as an input parameter. Then find first. So the first time we identify a user info object, we will get that object for that given ID, assign it to a new local variable. We don't get the user info object directly. We'll get an optional get. We're going to return the user info object that we got. If it is not there, it will return null. Now here demo util dot, this is private. Oh, I have to make all of them static. All right, and here while getting, we have to get it from demo util. So I'm getting it into a variable called list of user info. Also, I'll create another function for get by ID. For this, I have to add this property called value. That is a path variable. So I'm creating a path variable as an input parameter to this. Here I'll get a user info object only, and the return type should be user info object only. It shouldn't be a list. And let us try to print that user info object here. I'm starting the application. Let's see if all these web services are reflected on the Swagger UI or not. Yes, user info controller, get, yes, we see that, post. Let us try it, post, try it out. Response code is 200. Let's see if that is created. We can get all the entries that are added so far. So let's see, yeah. In the get method, when I trigger the get method, I am seeing ID as 1, name as Ravi, age as 20. And let us try this get method by passing an ID. Try ID, which is 1. Yes, I got this ID. We'll add a method called post. Sorry, we'll add a method called delete. For delete, we'll just delete everything that is out there in the system. Create a method called delete here, and clear. That clears off all the user objects. Let us also delete based on user ID. Remove if the ID is equal to the ID that is sent. Let us try to write an update function. Here we will remove delete based on ID and then add it. Delete based on ID. What ID it is? User info dot ID. Basically we delete that object from the list, and then we add that. Here this is delete and delete user info by ID. So I have to add value equal to /ID, and because this is a path variable, so here I am deleting based on the ID. Now let us implement that last function, most common function that is used, that is post. So this completes the and CRUD operation for user info object. Post, sorry, not post, put. So post is used for creating the object, put is used for updating the object. So let me just copy that same method here instead of refactoring it a lot. Let us see if all of them comes here or not. Yes, they are there.